Good morning.
Good morning.
A magazine article was sent to me from the mainland that had as its title, "Is God Leaving the Campus?" And the answer to that question is no. God is not leaving the campus. God is returning to the campus. The article is based on the fact that so many students in the colleges and universities are not attending church. And by this it is assumed that they are deserting God. On the other hand, the fact is that that very desertion is proof that they are seeking God. They haven't found God where they were looking for it, and they are looking for it, and many of them are finding at least the beginning. It is pointed out that there is a great deal of immorality, delinquency among college students, but that probably is among those who at no time were the religious seekers. They are indicating more or less that they are following the times. The fact of juvenile delinquency or college immorality is no sign at all of a decadent society. It is merely the sign that God has not yet been discovered. In foreign countries like England, Australia, many other countries, church attendance is very small, in some cases below 10%. But never believe for a moment that this is an indication that God is being deserted. It is rather an indication that many have discovered that they couldn't find God in the church, and they've decided to seek elsewhere. And of course we have evidence of that in the tremendous numbers of people throughout the world who in this century have begun to seek God in the metaphysical and spiritual movements and unorganized movements, in the amount of literature that is available of a non-churchly substance, and yet religious. You know, in the beginning of this earthly experience, we had only a physical mode of life. Farming, road building, warring, fishing, hunting, all of life was lived on the physical level of experience. As a matter of fact, it is only within the last 400 odd years that we have a printing press. Up to that time, the number of people who could read and write were very, very few. So you know that they were living their lives purely on the physical level. Even an important subject like marriage was conducted on the physical level of life. Parents arranged for marriages, not with any idea of love or compatibility, but as to whether or not a woman could take care of a busy household and raise a family, and whether or not a man could do sufficient hunting and fishing and building to keep the home going. Eventually, the world groped toward an understanding of the mind, and gradually discovered the mind. With that discovery, life became less physical, gradually less physical, gradually more mental, until today we have a miracle confronting us that is frightening many people, frightening millions of people, all because of the discovery of the mind. In England, there was a steel mill that employed 40,000 workers, mostly laborers. And it turned out X number of tons of steel. But they have now built a new steel mill, the same company, and instead of 40,000 employees, they will have only 10,000, and these will be electronics engineers. There will be practically no laborers. In other words, this world has advanced far beyond the physical sense of life into the mental. In the coal mines, they are no longer engaging coal miners. They are allowing the present generation of coal miners to die out or be retired, but they are being replaced with electronic engineers to do coal mining electrically or electronically. Life is becoming vastly different than it was in my younger years. In just this one generation. And of course, we are only at the beginning. In the same way, as the printing press developed, as books became available, we entered a whole world of people who not only could read and write, but who had available to them enough access to the mental realm so that they could know and enjoy some of the finest of literature. And art, music, all of these things that come forth from the mind. Well, the publishing industry is going through a revolution today, and just as in some foreign countries they no longer publish hard-covered books except textbooks that are supposed to last a long time, but they're doing most of their publishing in paperbacks, and thereby making literature, art, music available to everyone as fast as they can develop their mental capacities. And one of the days you will find that taking place over here. At present there is a resistance to it because it is so difficult to give up yesterday's manna. But the day will come when you will see over here very few books published in hard covers except textbooks, because more and more people want books, want access to that mental realm. Along with the development, the discovery and the development of the mental realm, access has been made to the cosmic realm. This is the reason that in the past less than 100 years we have made greater strides in invention, science, discovery, knowledge of the world, knowledge of the hidden secrets of the world, even down into the atom, because with the discovery of the mind, access has been gained to the cosmic, the universal mind, the storehouse of wisdom. In other words, these discoveries of science, art, literature, music, these have come from the storehouse in which they are stored, and as we gain access to that storehouse, the universal mind, the cosmic mind, gives up its wisdom to us and reveals to us that which we are seeking. Whether we are seeking a way to the North or the South Pole, whether we are seeking a way to fly in the air or under the water, whether we are seeking automation, machinery, whatever it may be that we are seeking, we can only find if we have access to the cosmic mind, to the universal mind of man. Individual man, through his mind, reaches back and finds that his mind is a corridor leading to the infinite, the universal mind, in which every secret of life is stored up. Now, this changes the entire nature of human living. First of all, because we are no longer confined to what our ancestors knew. We are not confined or limited to their ignorance. now we have access to infinity, and there is no limit to what can be achieved through our understanding of the fact that we do have access to the universal storehouse of the laws of life, the physical laws, material laws, mental laws, laws of nature. All of these laws govern our automobiles, our airplanes, all of these laws governing the new ways of raising crops. So we come to the age in which we have been living this past century, in which, because of our access to the cosmic mind, we are now going to be able to live without limits. You remember that I have brought out that in 1900 articles were published stating that our industry would soon come to an end because not enough horses were being raised. And without horses, you can't have industry. But you see, our access to the infinite brought forth the automobile, and so we discover now that we are not limited to what our ancestors thought of as power. We have a new power. 20 years ago, articles were published in California warning the world that we were coming to the end of our supply of oil for gasoline, and that it would not be too many years and we wouldn't have enough gasoline to run our commerce. Well, of course, what happened is that so many new sources of oil were discovered that quickly met the situation for the time being. But since then, we have again demonstrated that our access to infinity means that it will make no difference when our supply of gasoline comes to an end, for we have found another power which can well take the place of gasoline and run our ships and automobiles, so that we are no longer going to be limited to gasoline. Through our access to infinity, we have learned the nature of atomic power, and eventually we will have that for everyday use. You see, there is no limit to the capacity of man, because there is no limit to the capacity of the cosmic mind, the universal mind of man, the storehouse of infinity. And as long as man recognizes that he has access to this entire universal world, realm, he will bring forth that which will increase the supply of harmonious living. He will bring forth that which will lessen physical exertion and increase mental powers, and thereby bring forth a whole new world, a whole new world which you've already seen brought forth in the last 50 years, and which is only the beginning of a still greater era. Throughout all of this time, dating back, let us say, 4,000 years onto the present, there has been virtually no progress made, no advance in religious discovery. While the world was progressing from the physical realm of life to the mental, the religious life remained in the status quo of paganism, ignorance, superstition. That is all there is to the religions of the world. Just ignorance, paganism, superstition, the same as it has been for 4,000 years. True, during this time, there have been mystics who have revealed spiritual truth, but this has never found its way to the public. And therefore, the public has continued to live in the religious life of 4,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, 1,000 years ago, without any sign of an advance, until the mental science, or mental sciences, mental religious sciences, were brought forth, which really, well, they were mistakenly called religion, because no mental science really has any connection with religion either. This too is the mental mind of man expanding and finding new principles. And so as we come into the metaphysical movements of this particular era, just as the inventors and scientists have found a whole new world in the mind and through the mind, so the metaphysician has discovered a whole new world in the mind, applicable to other phases of his human existence than invention and science and so forth. All of this indicates an advance. All of this shows our progress. And then, one day, we awaken to a discovery that shocks us, and that is this: this realm of the mind that we have discovered can be used both for good and evil. All of these discoveries, electricity that gives us heat, cold, comfort, also kills or can be used to kill. The discovery of the atomic secrets, which eventually will free this world from most of its physical force, physical labors, also used to kill. Dynamite, which originally was discovered as a great means of helping us to carve out cities from the country and other useful purposes, became gunpowder to destroy life. And so you find, shockingly, that access to this cosmic, universal mind of man is a marvelous thing in one way, but frightening in another, because whether or not these great discoveries are ultimately used for the welfare of mankind depends on the moral nature of man. And the moral nature of man never has been above that of self-interest, self-preservation, self-gain, self-profit. Only when a spiritual element enters the consciousness of an individual do they lose the capacity to decide on good or evil, or to bring forth for evil. But remember, until man finds a way to bring the spiritual element into the consciousness of mankind, he is at the mercy of those who govern, of those who control, of those who lead. And as we have seen, in this era of wonderful accomplishments, these great accomplishments have not lessened our fears or dangers. They have increased them. No one on the face of the globe today can truthfully say they are happier or safer or more secure or freer because of these great discoveries. More comfortable, yes, of course. Of course, we're all living with tiled bathrooms and electricity and air conditioning and all the rest of the comforts of life. But would you say that mankind is happier, safer, freer? Of course not. There isn't a country on the face of the globe where man is not more in bondage to his government than he was 50 years ago, where he isn't more governed by his government, more controlled by his government. And always remember that if it isn't your government or mine, there is always one just across the border. And so it is that if you examine yourself, you will discover that these inventions, these discoveries, this great progress has not brought this world into greater freedom, into greater peace, into greater safety, but rather have increased the burden in every direction of life. There is no need to point out that in spite of all the great mental discoveries, that we need to build more mental institutions than ever before, and that we are given such beautiful figures as 7 or 15 people out of every 100 must expect to end up in a mental institute, and so forth and so on. Life hasn't become easier for the people of this world. It has just become more physically comfortable, but the burdens they carry in the mind are greater. And that comes from fear of the very discoveries that should set us free. In this age, a question has been raised. It has been answered before by mystics, never given to the world, and so we begin all over again in this age, and we ask the question, is there a transcendental power, or let us put it in plain English, is there a God? Is there a God or a God power that can be brought into human existence to give us the freedom we had in the beginning with God? Or is there a God? Is there a God power that can be brought into human existence to change the nature of man so that in the mind of man there will be no desire to use these powers, whether atomic power or advertising power or propaganda power, to enslave the world? This is the question. You, of course, do not doubt that there is a God. Most people on earth have not yet reached the stage of conviction that there is a God. They might answer that they believe in God, but believing isn't very forceful power, isn't very convincing. But an absolute conviction that there is God, very few on earth have this. But having this conviction, as you know, is not sufficient, because there remains this other step. Of course I know that God is. There would be no effect if there weren't a cause. There would be no such thing as a law of like begetting like. There would be no such thing as mathematical perfection or musical harmony if there were exceptions to rules, or if this were an accidental creation. Oh no. No. We know enough, not only by observation, but more especially by our intuitive faculty. Something within us that says, don't doubt that there is a God. Never doubt there is a God. That's sheer stupidity. There is a God, but how do I bring this God into my individual experience, and thereby discover that if I can bring it into my individual experience, I have the assurance that eventually it will function in the experience of all mankind. if I cannot prove it in a measure for myself, I have no way at all of proving it for you. If I cannot in some measure, tiny measure perhaps, demonstrate the presence and power of God in my individual experience, I cannot share the experience with you because I have nothing to share. I am barren. So with you. You have a household. You have a family. You have friends. It would be ludicrous for you to talk to them about the God you believe in, the God you are convinced of, until you discovered the way of bringing the activity of God into your individual experience, and then you wouldn't have to tell them about it, they would observe it. That is why when you really experience God, you don't have to advertise or proselyte. You merely have to live and to be, and you will soon discover that those who are seeking that level of life will find you, and you'll save yourself many heartaches. By not giving your pearls to the unprepared thought and having them thrown back at you. As long as we remain in this mental realm, the cosmic realm of the universal mind, please remember that we remain in the realm of good and of evil. We can learn the secrets of mind and then find that they are used for the purpose sometimes of malpractice. We can learn the laws of mind and then discover that they are used for propaganda purposes, advertising purposes, and not necessarily advertising of the right nature. Ah, yes, we have access to the mind. We have access to the laws that govern nature. But the next step that we must take is to find access to the world of morals. I'm not speaking merely of sexual morals. I'm speaking now of morals in its complete sense. The morals that govern us in business, morals that govern us in art and literature, morals that govern us in all of our human relationships. We must find access to this in order that these great discoveries may eventually be turned wholeheartedly for the use of man in his legitimate life. You can imagine how wonderful it would be if the tens of thousands of university students who are studying scientific subjects were devoting all of their time and energy to bringing forth these scientific laws for our good, instead of having to realize that 90% of our boys and girls studying scientific subjects are still studying how to destroy us more completely, more quickly, more surely. The change takes place as it takes place in your or my individual experience. When, in addition to our knowledge, we gain something that changes our moral nature. Now, you and I cannot do that of our own accord. Be assured of this, that you cannot decide to be good. Yes, you can. Won't help much. We all know about New Year's resolutions. And the reason is that we just cannot rise higher in our humanhood than the idea of preserving ourselves, benefiting ourselves, helping ourselves, enriching ourselves, and with very little regard for what effect it may have on others. It is only when an element enters our consciousness that is not human, that is neither physical nor mental, that our moral capacity is developed. Spiritual capacity, moral capacity, call it what you will, a something that renders it impossible for us to do evil consciously to another, that renders it impossible for us to work for the injury of others, for the loss of others. Here is where we are at the beginning of a new era. We know now that all humans live by the law of self-preservation. We know that this is what is called the natural law of mankind. That is what makes it possible to legalize war and even to moralize about it. It's perfectly all right to destroy someone else to protect ourselves. That has become ingrained as a human way of life. That is why the entire advertising industry of this nation is what it is. Just a means of taking from the public by any means, regardless of the nature of the harm it may do them. This underlies most of the so-called principles of advertising. Let the buyer beware is still the motto. This cannot change until we discover that a new element must enter human consciousness, and I must first discover a way to bring that element into my consciousness, because if I cannot gain some measure of it, I cannot even tell you about it, much more demonstrate it, much more help you to attain it. And so, until you become aware of the fact that there is a transcendental or God power, spiritual power, and that there is a way of introducing it into your consciousness, you cannot live by it, and you cannot yet teach it to others. Now our problem is this. God is, that is, spiritual power is, spiritual presence is, spiritual integrity is. And as we go back into the revelations of the mystics, we discover not only that it is, but that it is closer than breathing, nearer than hands and feet. In fact, the realm of this spiritual light is within you and within me. And at least we are coming now to where we can set about opening our consciousness to this experience. The Master revealed at one time that you cannot give communion, you cannot give baptism, you cannot be baptized with water. That the physical act of baptism is but a symbol of the real baptism. And the real baptism is the Spirit which has touched one individual is imparted to those who seek it. In other words, I, if I be lifted up, shall draw men unto me. In other words, every time that any individual has received baptism, the visitation of the Spirit, ordination of the Spirit, that individual immediately is an instrument through which it is imparted to others who seek it. The seeking must be real, it must be sincere. It must not be for some personal motive or purpose. It must be for the experience of the grace of God. Then, when we as individuals open our consciousness to receive the grace of God, we make ourselves receptive to it, and somewhere in the world there is a spiritualized consciousness to impart it to us. There is an old saying that when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And there's quite a misunderstanding about this statement. Too many believe that this means that when the student is ready, some human teacher is going to come along to instruct them. And it really doesn't mean this at all. There are too few spiritual teachers in the world. They couldn't possibly reach humanly all those who might be seeking. Oh no, the statement means this. When I, as an individual, am ready when I really and truly, in my heart and soul, desire to know God aright, to receive God's grace, to be freed of my sins, false appetites, hates, enmities, jealousies, other human traits, when I'm ready for that experience, really ready to be made spiritually whole, the teacher appears. And, it may be a teacher 10,000 miles away, sitting in meditation, who knows nothing about you personally, and of whom you know nothing personally, and yet you receive your grace. You receive your freedom. You may never get to know who the teacher was in meditation that reached you, and the teacher may never know you, and may never know that you were reached by his or her meditation, because there is nothing personal in the spiritual kingdom. It is entirely the activity of God consciousness. Therefore, when you are ready for God consciousness, whether or not there is a human teacher available is of no importance. Your teacher, the divine consciousness, will appear and set you free. If a spiritual teacher were limited to helping those who come within range of his physical presence, there would be very few helped on earth. And strangely enough, many of those who do have the good fortune to come into the presence of a spiritual teacher do not receive their freedom or enlightenment. There is a requisite for illumination, and that is the desire to be made whole. Not merely physically healthy or financially abundant or in relationships happy. Oh no. No, there is a kingdom of God, a realm of God about which the human mind knows nothing. Just as a few centuries ago, the human world knew nothing about the realm of mind, knew nothing of that cosmic influence that held all of the secrets of nature, all of the laws of nature. All they knew was to go out and do back-breaking work. So today, mankind has gone a step further in that it now has access to the cosmic realm. But remember, in this realm you still have good and evil operating, and you still have the capacity to use your knowledge and your discoveries for good or for evil. And therefore, your final freedom will not come until a spiritual influence has entered the consciousness of mankind, so that he will not only be empowered with spiritual grace to do good, but will at the same time lose the capacity even to think evil, much more do it. Each one of us who has come this far on the path has an obligation to the world. Not to tell it to the world. Far from that. But each one of us has an obligation, and that obligation is, now that we do know that there is a spiritual influence, which we may term the Christ, or the Spirit of God in man, or the indwelling presence, now that we know there is that, we owe it to this world to continuously open our consciousness until we receive it, until it is let loose within us, until it takes over our lives and frees us from this sense of self-preservation and lifts us, if possible, into the opposite extreme, the one revealed by Christ Jesus. Lay down your life, that someone else may live. Not take someone else's life that you may live, not take someone else's property that you may prosper, but lay down your life that others may live. This is the opposite of the human, which is self-preservation, even to kill, to preserve our own life. This is the opposite, to lose our life, if necessary, that others may live. Now, neither you nor I have the capacity to be so noble. So let us not live in a world of imagination and believe that that is just what we would do. Because of ourselves, we wouldn't. If the time comes when we would, or when we do, be assured that by that time we have received the ordination of the Spirit, we have received divine grace, and we are no longer doing it of ourselves. But it is now that I can do all things through Christ, even to the sacrifice of personal selfhood. There is a spirit in man, and this spirit is just as much in the most evil of men as in the most humanly good man. But this spirit must be awakened. Awake, thou that sleepest. Awake, rise, pick up thy bed. This is a dormant influence, the spiritual influence. It must be awakened, and with all of the help that we may receive, the major responsibility rests with us to bring ourselves to the point of conviction that we wish to be made whole, spiritually whole, that we wish to live our lives by the grace of God, not by personal sense. Because in proportion as we reach that point, our teacher appears. The divine consciousness, which is manifest in some individual somewhere on this side of the veil or the other, reaches us, and we are set free, just as Saul of Tarsus was reached by his teacher, even though his teacher had passed beyond this veil. Thank you. Thank you. Until next Sunday.